Good morning, guys. Welcome to another episode of XA Talk Show. And today we are going to talk about some technical subject. Okay, so technical subject. What are we going to cover? We are going to cover some random stuff, but such as emacs, Lisp, JavaScript, programming languages, Golang, and stuff. So let me show you. Okay, where do we begin? Let's begin with JavaScript. So I go to my JavaScript blog. Okay, so I have this JavaScript in-depth tutorial. Let me adjust the window position so you can see. And okay, so I have this JavaScript tutorial, JavaScript in-depth, and then there is JavaScript object references. Then there is DOM scripting. The JavaScript in depth covers JavaScript, the language, in depth. Then the JavaScript object references, obviously, they are references for JavaScript objects. Now, JavaScript objects are like, they are analogous to the standard libraries in Python or in Golang. So in JavaScript, the standard library, meaning part of the language, is not, they are called, they are basically just building objects. So that's this page. Then I have DOM scripting. Now DOM scripting is what you actually do when you use JavaScript to program websites. That's called, sometimes it's called web scripting, sometimes it's called DOM scripting, sometimes it's called single page web application. So anyway, and they are quite different. I mean, they are not just JavaScript, but using JavaScript to script, to create applications. So let's go here. Let's go to Google Chrome browser. Show it there. You can just web search DOM scripting Xali and you'll see my page. And DOM scripting, let's see some examples. I have some kind of fancy user interface examples. Let's see. Web scripting examples. Okay, so let's see image rollover. Now this is 1999 era. Like when you move over a button or some areas on the page, the image changes. So I'm showing you how do you do that in modern way. But this exists back in it's very popular back in 1999. So image rollover, pop-up window. This is it pops up a window. Let's see, digital clock, stopwatch, fade an element using CSS transition. Some kind of fancy kind of thing. So when you program Java, when you write a web application, you need to know JavaScript well. You also need to know the DOM well, and you also actually need to know CSS well and HTML, of course. And actually, I cover the basics of HTML and CSS. It's all here. You have the CSS transitions, animations, transform, and so on. Anyway, so DOM scripting. Let's show some more examples. Shake element. Create tooltip. Now tooltip is very interesting. It's very extremely useful. Like when you move to some area, then some information or image will pop up. Now this is used in, for example, Xali Unicode. I can show you Unicode characters. So let's go to Unicode Sports, for example. Then I move my browser to anywhere. Then you can see that a pop-up shows up showing information. Now there's this annoying thing I need to fix. Yeah, that thing I need to fix. Anyway, so that's the pop-up. This also if you go to Xali Emacs, in my Emacs tutorial, this is also used in a practical way. It's extremely useful. So you go to Xali Emacs tutorial and go to, let's say, practical Emacs Lisp, Emacs Lisp basics. Then you can see all these red, brownish red text. Those are Emacs Lisp functions, and if you mouse hover them, you will see their inline documentation. So this is actually extremely useful, and you can also move the mouse to any code that will also work. String equal and so on. So that is the use of JavaScript tooltip or balloon, pop-up balloon. On Windows, it's usually called tooltip. It's rather the common name is tooltip. But on the Mac, it's at various times it's called a balloon, pop-up balloon. It's usually called pop-up balloon. So that's so let me go back to my video. Let's see how many people are watching. Let's pop up the chat. So if you have any comments, questions, just type it. Okay. Now let's go back to, so you see tooltips, and I show you how to do that in JavaScript. This tooltip this is actually very interesting. First of all, let me tell you, like 10 years ago, this tooltip on the web is extremely popular. Okay, so many people want to use it, including big corporations like real estate companies or whatever, or they sell cars or whatever. Usually commercial organizations, they need tooltip. They want tooltip. This is a great feature. But back in, let's say, in 2006, not many people know how to do that. Okay, it's kind of a mystery. And then there are there are actually one or two guys who created a library, JavaScript like library, that allows you to use tooltips, and that became extremely popular. Like today when we talk about JavaScript, there's something comes to everyone's mind. Frameworks and libraries such as React, Angular, React JS, Angular JS, jQuery, so on. So that's today. But back then, jQuery is, I think in 2006, jQuery it just began. I think jQuery just began. So, but if you do web dev at the time, everyone would know this library that does the tooltips. But eventually, as time goes on, there's more browser support. Like the browser support for CSS or JavaScript becomes more and more consistent, across browsers. So tooltips becomes easier to implement. So as time goes on, of course, that library, that tooltip library died. Like nobody heard of it today. Actually, you can still find out that library, the name of that, by using Wayback Machine. For example, you copy my URL. Actually, this is my local URL. So this is the local URL. Let's change it to my full URL, and let's go to Wayback Machine. Wayback Machine. Wayback Machine is a internet archive. So we go there, turn on JavaScript because it requires JavaScript. Oh, it's already on. So paste it here, go to my website, JavaScript tooltip. Okay, so I think I wrote this page new in 2011. However, I have a older page at a different URL that talks about how to use this tooltip library. But anyway, let's have a look at this page. Let's see what we see. Oh yeah, so there it is. So I wrote this in 2011. So this library is called overlib. This library is called overlib. It's extremely popular. Back then you don't like GitHub is not that popular yet, or doesn't even exist. You see, you can see a tooltip there. And let's go to the website. Let's see if they still exist, just for curiosity's sake. So this is the URL, overlib. Okay, this is Wayback Machine's version, but let's see if that page is still up. It's gone. Overlib. So let's see who is this guy, if he still maintain a website. Probably not. So as you get old, you observe all these people and web site, web software or technology. They, as time goes by, they just go away. I a lot. As I work, because I have a website. I have a website starting in 1987. I have a domain xali.org starting in year 2000. So I've been writing web pages and for 20 plus years. So I know a lot of websites, and they just died out. They people get old, they retired, or they don't. So you see that a lot, and you will see that in 10 years from today, like like today, maybe React JS is so popular, Angular JS is so popular, but in 5 years, in 10 years, it's like possibly nobody ever heard of them. The newer generation. Then you're gonna tell your story how how React was. Anyway, so there is this library for tooltips, overlib. It's okay. Let me make a copy of this actually, so later on I can add to my XR Talk Show page to see what topics we've discussed. So anyway, so yeah, tooltip is very useful, and that's how you do it. Then let me show you another one, falling snow effect. Now this is also from 1999. You see this since 1999. Falling snow or falling hearts or falling rain. And I have the modern implementation. You do it this way. But by the way, so the tooltips and this falling snow effect, they are quite interesting because the way you do them, the technology is almost like a happenstance. It just it so happens that you can do them. The way you do them. For example, say the let's say that let's look at the tooltip. Okay, the tooltip. So you must hover something and something pops up. But how do you do that? basically the way you do that is when you create an event mouse hover. So when mouse hovers, a function is called. Okay, a function is called. Now all this is nothing special. So when your function is called, you want to do this pop-up balloon. But how do you do that? The way you do that, the technology behind it is such that you create a new HTML element with border, like the way you want your tooltip to look. HTML, like you create a new HTML tag, let's say div tag, with image or text inside it, and you create a border. Okay, then you use JavaScript to create CSS, a cascading style sheet for this element, such that it is actually in a different layer. That in a different layer. So CSS allows you to do that. Let me show you how that is done. So CSS, you have these position, static, relative, fixed, absolute kind of properties for CSS, and they are fairly complicated. They are fairly complex to understand. Somehow CSS is this vagosity. CSS is pretty bad actually. But anyway, so CSS, you have these position properties, and with static, relative, fixed, absolute, possible values, and some of them actually create, they make the element into a new layer. So in HTML you can kind of have like a different layer, as in something like in a Photoshop image editor, you have different layers, and the layers in front will hide, behind, hide whatever is behind it. So that's it. That is CSS layers. So what you do with the tooltip is that you use JavaScript to create a new div elements. Then you make its CSS so that the position actually specify it is a new layer. So this element is in a new layer. So that's what you do. That's how you get a tooltip. So this is kind of, I don't think it is. I don't think it's kind of intentional, original design uh, purpose. It somehow just works. So it's uh, yeah. So but in contrast to, for example, when you look at GUI, GUI widget libraries for desktop, for Linux, for Mac OS, for Windows, um, you know, typically you have a GUI library or widget library. Sometimes it's called widget library. For example, on Linux, you have Qt library, or you have the GNOME library. Okay, let's not look them up. But anyway, those are GUI libraries. And then in this library, you have a bunch of functions that draw buttons, draw menus, draw windows, draw including tooltips. They but those these libraries functions, they are actually designed for it, which is not so for, I don't think it is a case for CSS. So somehow CSS, and because the popularity of JavaScript, they kind of changed their nature a little bit, because so this topics uh, becomes part of history. I mean, the subject is, we have, HTML is originally designed just to show academic publications. Typically, like you have headers, you have sections, and you have paragraphs, you have lists. Then over the past 20 or 30 years, it becomes mostly, I would say, primarily as they are used primarily for the purpose of writing web applications such as Amazon, Gmail, basically almost every website you visit. They are not so much for communicating information anymore. Of course, there are websites. There are news websites that um, you know. Um, but anyway, and CSS is originally designed to control the style of your layout, not layout exactly, but the style. But anyway, so it becomes it has somewhat changed to be adapted for web application use. So anyway, so I was talking about my DOM scripting tutorial. Of course, if you like it, buy it. I have you can buy it. My whole JavaScript in-depth tutorial and the whole thing, basically HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and DOM. But anyway, so yesterday, I created several new pages. These DOM HTML GUI pages. For example, you have buttons. I show you how to create a button, and I show you how do you uh, manipulate a button's behavior with JavaScript. Like, know when is it clicked? How do you get when is it clicked? So you have this bunch of GUI tutorials, new page. I created them. They are updated from my old HTML form. For example, this HTML form example, I wrote this in 2005, and so today it's a complete different nature. So anyway, what I want to say is that I created these new pages about modern processing of GUI. How do you create GUI in your web pages? So that is one topic. Now let's go to my web blog. There are several other topics, and let's talk about them. Uh, okay, so there is browser get elements by class name now returns a true array. Now this topic is a little bit advanced, um, but if you are a web dev, you'll know what I'm talking about. So typically when you use document get element by name, they return not list or HTML collection, and they are not true arrays in JavaScript. JavaScript has this kind of what or complication with array. I'm going to explain that in a bit. But anyway, the when you use get element by name, the return value is not a true array, but rather it's called array-like object. So what does that mean in practice is that you cannot directly call any array methods because those objects are not arrays. You don't have the method for JavaScript arrays. So to use them is a little bit complicated. But the thing I noticed yesterday is that today on a Safari web browser and also on Google Chrome browser, it looks like they return true arrays now. That's quite interesting. Actually, let's test it out to see if that's actually true. Now let me show you. Let's see. Do I want to talk about JavaScript Array, or let's see how many people are watching. One people. Okay. So if you are watching, say hi, and and let me no, let's see what I want to talk about now. um, get element by name. uh, let's do a demo. Let's do a demo then, about this topic about get element by class name. So I'm going to explain what it all means. Okay, so let's do that. So I'm going to create a new start command log. Okay, let me start my command log in Emacs so you can see all the commands I call in Emacs. Hey, good morning, Dion. You just got in here. Great. So we are talking about some technical details of JavaScript and web scripting. Uh, by the way, what you are a programmer, right? You are in LA, and do you do web applications? Okay, let's go ahead to the demo. So let's open a new buffer, Emacs buffer. Save this file as xx.js. Actually, xx.js. Okay, and create a new buffer again. Save this as xx.html, and okay. Okay, something wrong with my mod. So we created a new HTML page, and let's do a dive. Get element by name. So let's go to this page. This page shows you all the possible ways to get an element, an HTML element or XML node. So you have get element by ID, you have get element by tag name. So let's use get element by tag name. Okay. Hold on a second. Let's go to xx.js. We want to link that. Okay. And let's create some tags. P something 1, something 2, something 3. Okay. So we created 3 graphs, and then open the JavaScript file, paste it here. Constant x equals to tag name. Tag name will be p. Okay, console log x. Okay, save it. Now open this file in browser and open the console log. You can see that it returns a HTML collection. It has 3 elements. Each element is the HTML paragraph. Now what we want to do is we want to check if that result is a true array. So how do you do that? You have this function array true. I forgot what's the name. So let's go to JavaScript in depth, and let's go to array how to. Okay, so there it is. Array is array. Let's do that. Okay, and now we refresh the page. Oh, then it returns false. That's odd. So Dion says, I do a bit of web stuff, but I mostly just use JavaScript as a way to pipe data to the back end and to display the result on the page. I see. Okay, so from here we know it is not a true array because it returns false. But however, let's try to use a array method on them. So if it's not true array, then supposedly we cannot use array method. Now for each is a array method. Let's just use it. Let's see if it works. Arrow function x let's say arrow function. Let's just say console log x dot I want to get inner text, not value. So I want to get text content. So there, this is supposed to print something 1, something 2, something 3, the content of the paragraph. And now let's refresh the browser. Okay, so it says type error for each is not a function. So indeed, that is expected because x is not an array. Therefore, it does not have the for each method. But in that case, what we can do is like this: array prototype for each dot core. Let's try that. This is the way to call a array function on a array-like object. Okay, let's refresh the browser. It works. It works. That's strange because yesterday apparently this works. Let's try that. This is not supposed to work if x is not an array, a true array. But yesterday I was working on something that worked, so that still works. That's very strange. So actually this is a strange thing. Because these 3 dots, they are an operation called they are a new JavaScript operator called spread operator. So the operand to the right of it should be a iterable object, and true array are iterable object, but array-like objects are not iterable objects. So why should this work? I do not know. So the next step we can do is we can try to see if this x is a iterable object. Now, how can you tell if something is iterable? We can tell by checking if it has symbol iterator method. Okay, so how can we tell if that has a symbol iterator method? We can do it by well, one way we can do it is to list all properties of the object. So let's go here, JavaScript properties, list properties. So we want to list properties. So we can use reflect on keys. So that's what we're gonna do. Reflect on keys. Okay. We're gonna show all the properties of X, and we're gonna print it. And we're gonna see if it has a symbol iterator property. So let's refresh. So it does not have a symbol iterator property. You see, all its properties are just the integer 0, 1, 2, and length, I think. Let's see. Refresh. Yeah, so so this is kind of very strange to me. So in summary, when you use get element by tag name or something similar that returns a HTML collection, the type is technically called HTML collection. So when it returns that, but however, we know that HTML collection is not a true JavaScript array, nor is it a JavaScript iterable object. Now, because it's not a true array, therefore you cannot have for each method. You cannot use for each method directly. Check, that we have verified. However, it is not a iterable object, but it works if we use the spread operator on it. So this is kind of strange. So it seems somehow the browser is able to use spread operator on it, even though it's not a iterable object. Let's try one more thing. Let's just print let's try to print the symbol property. Symbol iterator, okay. Let's refresh. Oh, so it does have. So it is an iterator. Oh my god, this is amazing. So at this point there are several questions coming up, because right now we are seeing that it does have the symbol.iterator property, which is a symbol, new thing in JavaScript. So it does have that property. So that means it is a iterable object. This HTML collection is a iterable object. But however, why is that when we use reflect on keys, which basically print all possible keys, it does not show that property? Um, so let's go back to reflect on keys. Let's double check. So reflect on keys returns a array of the object's keys, including symbol keys and non-enumerable keys. So why is it not returning, the symbol iterator key before? So okay, so at this point, let's try another thing. Let's try to see check property existence. Object has own property, so X has own property. Let's do that. Okay, so let's refresh the browser. Type error. Uncaught type error cannot convert a symbol value to a string. Has own property. Oh, wait a minute. This should be like that. Let's try again. Wait, I'm not seeing. Okay, now I see what it means. So the object X do not have the symbol dot iterator property. However, it must be inherited. That's right. So I made a mistake. It must be inherited from whatever is HTML collection's parent. Yeah, that would make sense. I see. So now in summary, HTML collection is a iterable object. Let's do another verification by checking the parent using reflect has. Okay, so reflect has. Okay, X and the key is symbol iterator. Let's refresh again. Okay, so that is true indeed. So in summary again, HTML collection is a object that is a iterable object because its parent along the parent chain, the prototype chain, there there is a object that has the property symbol dot iterator. So it is a iterable object. However, it is not a true array. So that is why you cannot use the true array. You cannot call array methods directly. However, you can use the spread operator on it. Okay, that makes sense. That I actually learned something today for that. Okay, I think that is about JavaScript, and that's about this topic. So let me type it out. HTML so we found that HTML collection is not a true array, true JavaScript array, but is a iterable object because the property symbol iterator is in its parent chain or prototype chain. Okay, so that is why. So we learned about that today. Great, I learned about that. So Dion says, does JavaScript have any built-in iterables? Other than array? Yes. By default, the three objects that are iterable are array, set, and map. I think that's it. So let's check my tutorials. Iterable. So let's go to iterable and scroll down standard iterable objects. So you got string, array, set, and map. Yeah, including string. So that is about that. I think that is about that. Then let's go to my web tutorial. Let's see what else we talk about. So yeah, that is interesting because iterable is introduced in JavaScript 2015. So let me describe the whole problem with this. So JavaScript and DOM. JavaScript, the language, is itself extremely convoluted. It's a very extremely lousy language. But in 2015, beginning in 2015, they added a ton of new features. However, it remains backward compatible. So meaning that you could use JavaScript as powerful as Python or Ruby, but however it still has lots of so-called warts or kind of defects or complexities. So that's one thing. JavaScript 2015 is pretty new. Okay, that's JavaScript, very complex. Now DOM, when you actually code website applications, you have to use the DOM technology, which is not really part of the JavaScript language, such as get element by ID, document query selector, things like that, control manipulate the page. So that's DOM. That's so-called DOM, which stands for document object model. But actually, it's not. It's more than that. You also have browser object model. But we basically just call it DOM. Okay, you use DOM to script web pages to create web applications. Now, when you use DOM, okay, JavaScript is the language is extremely complicated. DOM is also extremely complicated. So it's like hell, especially in the 2000s when browsers do not agree with each other. That's far worse. But today that problem went away mostly. So you no longer have to worry much about different browser behaviors. But still, the DOM technology itself is rather extremely convoluted. And together with you have to use JavaScript, DOM, but also HTML and CSS. CSS is also fairly complicated when you get to the details. So in summary, they are all, they are like just shit, they this technology. But what can you do? What can you do? You just move on. And okay, so they are complicated. Then let me discuss why, what's the problem with this HTML collection thing. So one of the problem, because of these complexities, one example of this complexity is that when you want to when you have a radio button, for example, on this page, you have several things on a page. You want to get them all. Then you want to you want to get them all, so you get a list kind of result, list or array kind of result. Then you want to apply a function typically to all the elements. So normally you would expect, when you get, using DOM get element by name or whatever, to get a bunch of elements, you get a list, then you call a array method to apply a function to them all. But that doesn't work. So this is an example of the complexity. It doesn't work. It doesn't work because when you get the use get element by name or something like that, it returns this so-called not list or HTML collection. Basically, it's just a list, but they are not true arrays. So you cannot call JavaScript array methods on it. You have to either use a for loop. Yeah, you can use a for loop. So so that is an example of the complexity. And I'm going to possibly I'm going to explain what's the deal with true array or array like things in JavaScript. That is another example. That's an example of JavaScript complexity. This HTML collection or not list do not return a array. That's an example of the DOM complexity. So you got this garbage, basically a whole bunch of garbage. And also, by the way, when you use get element by name, uh, there are several functions, DOM functions, that allow you to get a bunch of elements. So you can, for example, get all elements of the same class name or same tag name, such as paragraph or div, same class name, or with a particular name attribute. Basically, you get a list of results. But then some of them returns a not list, the so-called not list. Some of them returns a HTML collection type. So you have these two different things. That is another complexity of the whole DOM thing. You know, so what's the difference? Basically, not list is supposed to be just nods, including white space. Okay, that's another complexity because in HTML, when you have these elements and when you have white space between elements, such as line return or space, those white spaces are also considered as a node. Those are part of the branch of your tree, your HTML hierarchy. So, including comments, including like HTML comments, that's also a node. So when you get some element by some children, all the children of an element, you get this. A lot of them are white space nodes. So what's the use? So it's really stupid, really. The reason they have white space, they count white space as part of the node, is because suppose you want to process HTML document, but you also want to preserve the source code layout, like where people put new lines. For example, you are writing a software to reformat HTML source code. So you can tell exactly where is new line, where is white space. You can manipulate them. I think that is the original reason why white spaces are considered as a node, uh, in DOM. But when you actually do web application programming, like nobody uses that. Nobody uses that. That's it's rather stupid. So over the years, they have created new methods that kind of fix that. Yeah. So for example, the new method that tried to fix that. For example, let's go back to DOM scripting. Um, So here I explain what are the white space nodes. You can see, here. So they introduced a bunch of new methods that does not return, kind of ignore the white space nodes. Okay, so that's about white space nodes. Now, white space nodes is another example of the DOM complexity. So let's go back to our previous topic. So when you are using get elements by tag or by name or by class, these kind of so-called selectors, they sometimes returns a node list. Sometimes some of them returns a HTML collection. The difference originally was because node list contains any node, while HTML collection is supposed to ignore white space node, and they should also only contain HTML elements, but not XML elements. So when you use SVG or other XML technology, the HTML collection will not work. So you see this all these complexities anyway. So you have not list, you have HTML collection, you have this kind of complexity, and today they also fixed that. If you go to read HTML5 spec from the what working group, WHATWG, from their spec, you can see they talk about this thing. They are saying that HTML collection is kind of obsolete, but we cannot remove it. And they also say not list is also kind of outdated. So they suggest you use, there's a new thing called elements. So when you call this get element by name, they're supposed to return this new type, new interface called elements. But however, as far as I know, that is not popular yet. I'm not even sure if a browser implements that. So that is kind of the situation. That's some of the examples of the so many complexities in JavaScript and DOM scripting. Let's see. Maybe I should do a summary or maybe not. So we talked about, yeah. So let's get back to HTML collection. Yeah. Okay. Maybe let's talk about JavaScript Array. So what is the deal with true array versus array-like object? Now that this is another big complexity or what of JavaScript. In JavaScript, you have, in a typical programming language, let's say Python, Ruby, or or Golang, you have a array data type. Now, array data type is easy to understand. It's basically just a list of elements, and each element can be referred to by an integer, indexed by an integer, typically from 0. So you have 0, 1, array element 0, index first, index 1, to point to each element. Now that is also true in JavaScript. You have this object that's called array, okay, and basically it's a list of elements, and they are indexed by integers. However, here is the thing. This is actually a huge bag of complexity. It's not just even just a small complexity. It involves almost the whole language. It involves other complexities in order to explain that. But I'm going to explain that. So what's the deal with array and true array versus array-like? So anyway, in JavaScript, first of all, the JavaScript data types, variables do not have types, but values has types. So you have, you have these basic value types: undefined, null, boolean, string, number, symbol, and object. That is all. Now notice there is no type called array. Okay, so this is first of all, this is a major complexity in JavaScript. There's actually no such type as array. Then what is array? Array happens to be of the object type. So what is the object type? Object type. So object type. So you see, this is very stupid because there's no array. I mean, a language you define types, but then you don't have array type. You have object. Now JavaScript array belongs to, is actually technically the type object. Of all the things that are of the object type, then you have kind of like subtypes. So some object will be array, some object will be function, some object will be set, like a math set. Some object will be map type, like a hash table. So you have this, but technically they are only just the same type. They are all just object. So that is actually this. So this is actually the one of the big design problem of JavaScript. So when you have a value that is an object type, it may actually be a function, or it can be an array, or it can be other objects, or it can be iterable. Gets very complex. So what is array then? Array is a kind of a list of items. So, but in JavaScript, they are of the type object. But however, they how do we explain this? Okay, so let me explain what is an object. Again, so this is the complexity. JavaScript, the types, the object type is not really well defined. I mean, it is well defined in the sense that any value, um, it's not well defined in lots of ways. Any value, if you call typeof the operator typeof the value, then if it returns a string object, that means it's an object. But there are a lot of exceptions. But anyway, so I'm kind of getting complicated myself. But let me just get to the bottom line. So in JavaScript, when you have an array, that's technically it's an object type. There is really no the only true way to find out if it's okay. So it's an object type. But when you have an object typically in JavaScript is a collection of key value pairs. Now you can create any object such that all the keys are integers, like consecutive integers, like 0, 1, 2, 3. So if you create an object and such that its keys is 0, 1, 2, 3, then it's kind of like array, like JavaScript array. But however, they are different. Because the JavaScript array, it's not a true array data type in other languages. In that sense, it's easily broken. It can, if you delete an element using the delete operator, let's say you have an array of 5 elements, index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's say you delete an element, by using a delete operator. You delete the element number 3. What you get is a array missing an element, and that stops being that efficient array. It becomes what's so called a sparse array. Okay, so let's look at my tutorial here. It becomes a sparse array. Okay, the problem basically the issue, there are many issues, but the main issue is that JavaScript object and array, there's no clear distinction between them, between what is a object and what is a array. Because first of all, there's no such actually, there's no type, there's no value of the type named array. Everything is just an object. So you get this, so many complexities. But anyway, there is a way to find out if something is a true array. Uh, True array basically, effectively, what it means is that it is a value that is inherited, whose parent is the array dot prototype object. So that is kind of the definition of a true array. Not actually technically not actually true. So there are so many complications. But basically, in JavaScript, array you can create an object that is like array as long as you give it a integer sequence of key values of string type. And we usually call that array-like object. So anyway, I think I failed explaining this in a concise way because JavaScript is so convoluted. I think convoluted in so many ways. I'm trying to explain them in a logical fashion, such that if there are two complexities, I explain each one of them, each one of the complexities, and tell you their relations. Then you can see the whole picture why it's so complicated, because it's complicated in so many ways. First of all, the language, the value of a object type, it's not, you don't have actually have array, but then you have this. Yeah, it's very complicated to explain actually. um, so Dion says, why did they do it like this? I mean, basically JavaScript, the language, was invented, created, and implemented in 10 days by this Brenda guy from Netscape. He's on Twitter. So it's all done in a rush in 10 days, literally, 10 days, design and implementation, the whole thing in 10 days. So in the beginning, it was designed to be for non-programmers, for non-professional programmers. It was designed for mostly, the web designers, the HTML writers, who creates HTML pages, so that they can have some kind of interaction. Nothing like today's, web app, that is like far in the future. Nobody even imagined it. Well, it's kind of like science fiction back then. So it was just designed to be a non-professional scripting language for non-programmers who write HTML. Um, so anyway, and it's rushed in 10 days. It's based on scheme Lisp, and it's based on self language. So that, from scheme Lisp language, you get this functional programming thing, where a function can return a function or take a function as its argument. And from the self language, you get this prototype based object system, which is, I don't think it's good actually. So anyway, and all this are done in 10 days, and also the syntax must follow Java syntax. So that's another complexity, because back then, Netscape just made a deal with some microsystems, where some microsystems spend millions of dollars to advertise Java. So they want to ride the popularity trend. So they renamed their language to be JavaScript, following Java. even though the two languages has nothing in common, like they are totally different beasts from different universe. But because for commercial reasons, for marketing reasons, JavaScript syntax tries to be like Java. So all these things together, that is why it becomes this extremely complicated language, JavaScript. And a lot of it, a lot of these problems, if you trace, some of them is actually just a bug. It's just the bug in the code. For example, in JavaScript, the data types, one of the data type is null. Okay, let's go to value types. Okay, one of the data type is null. And if you call the Typeof Operator on a value, on the null, literal value null, what you get, it'll say object. It'll return a string that says object. Okay, this line. Why? Because but null, you see the problem here. Null is a type of value in JavaScript by the spec. Okay, there's a type called a null, and the only value of this type is the literal null. Okay, that is the only value of this type. There is this type called null. Now there is another type called object. Okay, then there is this operator called Typeof Operator. When you use this operator on a value, you will get a string that indicate what type that value is. But when you use this Typeof on a on the null thing, on the null value, when you say Typeof null, it actually returns object. Example here, you can see. You see, Typeof null equals to object true. So this is like a contradiction. That is like a major mistake. Why is that? So it turns out the reason for this, Typeof null equals to object, is because it's just a bug in the code. This guy, he's a master of JavaScript, so he dug it up. You can find the original source code, and he explained, it's basically just a coding mistake. But we are stuck with it, because JavaScript, they decided they want to be backward compatible, so they are not going to fix this. So we are kind of stuck with it. So every person who learns JavaScript, you have to learn, okay, Typeof null returns the string object. And every time you check something is an object, you have to deal with this special case. You have to check whether it equals to null or so you have this huge bag of problems with JavaScript. So today we kind of covered. Actually, we went into a lot of details about JavaScript. So back to the previous topic about the DOM returning HTML collection. That kind of anyway. So we already explained that. So I kind of finished. We reached a point of a pause. So we covered this subject. The question now is, what would be the next subject? Are we going to stop today's talk show, or are we gonna talk about something else? So if you guys have opinions, we got 5 people now. So if you have opinions, questions, let me know. We are at 1 hour and 14 minutes. I think that's good time for me to stop actually and take a break. So we covered a lot. So today actually the whole day is about JavaScript and its complexities. So let me get a drink then. Cheers. Okay, now so this will be considered the second half of the Xa Talk Show episode of the day. And this second half, we are just going to do some drinking and random chat. So Dion says, I'm not gonna crash. Thanks for the stream, Xa. Learned something useful. Thank you. Thank you. So Dion, what are you up to? So are you working in a company? Hey George, good morning, George. What are you up to, guys? So today's my juice is this humongous bottle, okay? Apple juice. Humongous. This is from Costco. Costco. Kind of a warehouse, kind of a shop in USA. In the rich and prosperous USA, but not so much today, comparatively speaking. You compare to China. Oh my God. But USA is still pretty good. In USA, like we are all concerned, especially as nerds, programmers, we are concerned about the privacy, the government is watching us, all this and that, and but if you use a smartphone like iPhone, Google, Apple, Facebook, they track you everywhere far more than even more so than the covert FBI, secret stuff. They know everything about you, every photo you take. So it's kind of, first of all, I want to say it's kind of funny. So in USA, in particular among us nerds, we are like complaining about privacy all day. I think it's only actually just us nerds, okay? We are complaining about privacy all day. But meanwhile, if you look at, your smartphone that's used by, most people, it's tracking you to death. So the nerds are not making sense at all. You are complaining about these things, but however, most nerds, yeah, all the programmers I know, they use the phone, no problem. They use Google Maps. They have to, almost like they have to. You know, so it's kind of like this silly. I'm beginning to think these nerds concerned. They are actually I'm beginning to think they are driven by some sort of the corporate created propaganda. Now I'm not too sure about this, but I'm beginning to think that way because they want you to think about these things, but however you have no effect at all. Anyway, that's one thing I want to talk. That's one thing, okay. But the other thing I want to mention is that people in China, it's like they don't have these concerns about privacy at all. Like in USA, especially on the news, we want to say, "Oh, China, look at China. They are, the government, Big Brother. They are watching, monitoring everyone's behavior. You have credit card system. Like what you can do depends on what you have talked about on social network. Like the government is monitoring you, everything." Like we kind of we want to make fun of, we want to laugh at China. But however, in China, most people, they don't have your American type of concerns about this privacy. Like I would say, it's more kind of like traditional Chinese thinking. They don't care. Like they don't have this individual privacy concern. You know, like it's not there. So while we, laugh at Chinese thinking that they are being monitored and all that, but I think most people, vast majority of people in China, that's just not their concern. That's so anyway. Okay, so good morning, Norman. Norman says, I encountered an emacs annoyance. Do you know the variable text quoting style? Yes, I think yes, I remember that. Now, documentation text gets weird Unicode punctuation substituted for apostrophe. Can eval example code properly. I have a big story too on that. I have a yeah, I can go on for an hour. This is because there's a fuckhead in the Emacs dev community. His name is David McKenzie, something like that. Okay, I can look up and show you my web blogs, and I can point you to the articles. But we'll do that. But he is the one who created this problem. This is actually a big story. Okay, this happened about 3 years ago. Okay, let me just talk about it. Now, if well, meanwhile, let me search so you can find my website about this issue. Search for Xali Emacs uh, curly quote. Okay, not those. Actually, I don't. Maybe I don't have it published because when I write blogs, quite often, Sometimes I write. I spend hours to write a blog, then decided I'm not going to post it because it's rather controversial. Especially in the past few years, like there's a period from 2011, from 2010 to 2011 to 2006, let's say. I was in a bad state. I try not to post anything controversial. And that's bad. That's bad for me as well because you really want to be yourself. If you want to, uh, you want to be yourself. That's the best way for you to prosper. You don't want to hide. Try to hide. For example, what I'm saying is that I have a lot of opinions and I'm usually controversial. And I don't give a fuck. What these people say is I want to pursue whatever is true, possibly biased, but I think it's true to my best, the best of my ability to be not biased. So I want to say what is true, and often that's just controversial, including technical topic in Emacs, Lisp, in Python, or non-technical topics like something is taboo in USA, but not taboo to Chinese. I grew up in China. That's something you can talk about in China, in Taiwan, but in USA, that's a taboo topic. You cannot talk about that because almost everyone will be against you. But I don't like that because I don't think that's good. If you look at the long-term perspective, even countries and empires come and go. And morality, ethics, certain value come and go. And sometimes this is bad, and another time this is great. For example, today we have the gay issue and trans issue. That's one example. Um, so so anyway, back to the topic. So okay, I kind of digressed. But anyway, so there is this Emacs issue. Let's see curvy quotes. Let's see if I can find out. Okay, one way to find out is to actually, oops, I opened by mistake. Create that. So one way to find out is to find out the guy's name. I'm going to show you the article. So Norman, are you still here? So yeah, okay. I'm going to talk about this topic about curly quotes in Emacs. What happens to it? Um, but first of all, in order to find the article, I need to find the guy's name that will help me find the article. So this guy, who his name is Alan. Okay, Alan McKenzie. So Alan McKenzie. Okay, this guy. He, in my opinion, he is the one to blame for the whole mess, for the regression of Emacs. Normally a software progress advances. He created this problem. He made Emacs go back because he is a guy. Okay, he's a guy. He does not like Unicode. Okay, his opinion. He's an old Lisper. Okay, I don't know how old he is, but probably 50 something or 60 something. He is a German. He's a German German guy. He's in German, and he is right now the maintainer of C code, C mod, and C++ mod. C++ mod is based on C mod. C mod is one of the earliest major mod in Emacs because Emacs, back then C language, it's a primary the earliest major mod in Emacs, and it is also one of the most complicated mod. And C++ mod is based on it, and it's very complex. But anyway, Alan McKenzie is a maintainer of the C mod. Okay, and he's a German guy. He's a oldish guy, and he is one of the old generation of Emacs users. So his idea of using Emacs is like in the 1980s or 1990s. He refuses to change. Okay, maybe it's critical to put it that way, but anyway, the way he uses Emacs is basically like 1990s or 1980s. Okay, there are a few other people like that. Richard Stallman is actually one of them. Richard Stallman, he doesn't actually know Emacs anymore. He's like using Emacs like in the 1980s way. Anyway, so Alan McKenzie, he's an old programmer. Okay, and his idea, so the way he used Emacs is like 1980s or 1990s, and he refused. He refused to, like, every 1 year or two. This happens often every year or two. In Emacs dev mailing list, you will have mention ideas about changing the GUI, graphical user interface, and like kind of modernization. But every time this happens, Alan McKenzie is one of the guy who shouted it down. Who shout it down. There are a minority of these people in Emacs list dev, the older generation. They don't want any change, kind of modern user requested change to Emacs. They want to use Emacs the 1980s way. Okay. Now, about the Unicode. Alan McKenzie is a guy who his idea of text is ASCII text. He do not want Unicode. He does not, like we had a major flame war fight about this issue back in 2008, let's say, or before. Okay, like if you search my name, Xa Li and Alan McKenzie on news groups, you'll find it. Asian, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we had big flame wars. But anyway, he doesn't like Unicode. He thinks that is like foreign. That's like, oh, new kids, kid stuff. At least 10 years ago, he think it's kid stuff. New young people, stupid people, they like Unicode, like curly quotes or arrow. His idea is pure ASCII. Then, as Unicode becomes more and more popular, becomes a mainstream, today Unicode, nobody dare to say Unicode is no good. Like all the web technologies or Unicode UTF-8. So Unicode becomes widely popular. Then there's also emoji, of course, which is another topic. So Unicode become widely popular. Then what does this Alan McKenzie say? So as far as I know, there's nothing he can do. He kind of, I think his stance is kind of okay. Yeah, in some cases you can use that. He kind of became that of that opinion because obviously you cannot refuse the advantages of Unicode. Where you need Chinese, Chinese, Japanese, or Korean, or Islamic, Arabic text. You can use all of them in one encoding. So Alan Mackenzie, obviously, he doesn't hold the opinion that everything should be ASCII anymore. But however, this idiot, okay, him, this idiot, he still insists that Unicode should not appear anywhere in source code, such as emacs Lisp. He insists that. You cannot, you shall not have Unicode in emacs Lisp source code. Everything should be pure ASCII. Now let me talk about the actual instance. About 3 years ago, let me find up my article. Maybe you can, so you can have more details. So let's search for his name in my Emacs blog. Let's say quote. Okay, XAR Emacs blog archive 2018 October. So here I discussed understand ASCII control characters. Okay, here I wrote a little rant on that, but actually that's not the full article. Let me see. So here is another article. Emacs redisplay internals and JavaScript mod war. Okay, all these are history, and they are big, giant flame wars. And here let's see quote. Okay, here I also mentioned about the quote issue only a little bit about the curly quote. Basically, what happens is that in 2008, is that no? It's not 2008. It's in let's see if I can find an article. Uh, okay, I want to find the article because I have written quite a lot about it, but I'm not sure I actually published it. But even if I did not publish it, I should have it in my blog here, local somewhere. Oh, okay. So hold on a second. Let's. I think we'll find it. Just give me a minute. Okay, I did not publish it. Every time I need to find something, it's hard to find. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's there somewhere. Let's try one more thing. Let's go to let's web search Alan Xali. Now I really want to tell this story, but right now I'm having problem finding my article because this is a huge story with hundreds flame wars going on in the Emacs dev mailing list. Hundreds flame wars, lasting for over a month. Each person's got opinions, but this Alan McKenzie. Basically, the story is that around 2016, okay, I think it's around 2016. There is this guy, a long time old Emacs dev developer. I forgot his name in my article, but I cannot find it right now. But so he made a commit to Emacs such that in in Emacs list documentation, for example, let's go to Softlight keys. Okay, so you can see for example, this is a Emacs list code, and in Emacs list code, if you want to refer to another command or function, you can use this quote by using a tick, like a back tick, followed by a straight quote, a single straight quote. That then when you do describe function on the function name, for example, describe function, you see this command is highlighted, so you can jump to it by just pressing enter. So that is how you do it. Markup. You mark up this function name by this backtick and a straight quote. Now I have an article here. If you go to practical Emacs list, and you go to Emacs list miscellaneous docstring markup, you can see I describe different ways to mark up the docstring in Emacs list function, inline docstring. So there's this situation. Now there's a kind of minor problem because you are not using matching quotes. Matching quote is much better than this kind of hack, because back then, in 1980s, you don't have curly quote, which is matching. So but today, in lots of documentations, they use Unicode and curly quote. It becomes more and more popular. But anyway, so there's this guy who fixed the problem. So he fixed it so that all the inline doc uses curly quote, matching quote, from Unicode. But the Alan McKenzie guy objected. Basically he is the guy who object to that. He argues that we should not do that. We should not have Unicode anywhere in source code. So what does he propose? the question remains. People like to see, curly quotes in the documentation when you do a describe function, because that way, it's more pleasing to the eye because the quotes are matched. So that's the issue people want to fix. So Alan's suggestion is that you create another layer so that when you call describe function, the describe function will process the string and change this markup into the curly quote one. And that variable name you just mentioned, Norman, that variable name text quoting style, that is the result of this mechanism. So you look up text quoting style to see, kind of as a preference what user really want to see. Then, the describe function will process, will show using those. For example, let's look at the inline doc describe variable text quoting style. So it says documentations. It says style to use for single quotes in help and messages. Yeah. So it becomes more complex because every time you call describe function or related functions, it has to go through this process, and it converts certain ASCII characters into the Unicode character. In his opinion, in Alan's opinion, this is he think this is simpler because because you don't have Unicode in the source code. But so eventually he, after few thousand, more than 1,000, I think, thousand something flame wars articles on this, the result is that he kind of forced the guy to revert the commit so that things are according to the way he prefer. And this story relates to another thing about Richard Stallman, fuckhead. In the end, everything was going smoothly. There's no revert. But in the end, it's Richard Stallman, the fuckhead. He has not been coded for like 20 years. He don't know nothing. He hasn't coded, a thing for at least 10 years. I would say at least. Then he made a comment, and he was not the technical leader at the time. The leader is Stephanie guy, a functional language researcher. But anyway, in the end, Richard Stallman made a comment. Oh, we should we should not have Unicode in source code. That made the thing that kind of broke the camel's back. That is actually the final result. But he has no power. Technically speaking, Richard Stallman was not the leader, the so-called maintainer of emacs at the time. It was Stefan guy, and Stefan did not object, the using curly quotes in source code. So Richard Stallman, it's a problem. Richard Stallman, what reason did he give? He didn't really give any reason. You see, the situation is that you have over 1,000 flame wars. There are about like 4 or 5 people who is on the Alan Mackenzie's side, which I don't agree with their opinions. They are these typical elite Unix philosophy fuckheads. They talk. Their reason to me are not good reasons, are not quality reasons or technically wrong, incorrect, factually incorrect, here and there. But anyway, there are about 4 or 5 people who are on the Alan Mackenzie's side, who does not want any Unicode in source code. And they give a bunch of reasons. I can refute all of them. Just either factually incorrect or just wrong. But anyway, so you have this flame war, and the situation and the leader, the Stefan guy who was the maintainer, is supposed to be the technical decision decider for these issues. He did not object. Okay, so everything is fine. Then if he did not object, then things will just go the way they are. But but then the Richard Stallman just says, "Oh, you should," he just made a comment like he's not supposed to be a technical leader. His opinion matters only when there's something related to politics, like the license, or or something has political results, such as whether to use some open source libraries, things like that. So really, he has no technically speaking, by the GNU free software policy about their leadership and maintenance. He has no say about the. He cannot make a decision. But however, because he's such a guy, Richard Stallman, he just sit there. He put his opinion out every day, and people just like implicitly there is a whatever he says has a big influence. So in the end, he just said, he just made some comment, like one sentence about please revert it, because he didn't actually even tries to give a reason. He just said please revert it because source code should not contain Unicode. That is it. You can find the whole issue. I cannot find my article, but we can find the Google the Emacs dev list thread on this issue. So let's search for Emacs dev list curly quote. Maybe we'll find that. Oh, okay. I found my article here. Okay, you can read the whole article. Then and you can also click to go to the Emacs list dev articles. Yeah. So this article, I remember this article is not fully written, but it kind of it's a draft. But anyway, so you can go to the Emacs dev list to see the entire flame war, thousands of messages on this. So here is a message from Adam McKenzie. This is the first message that he so his title is upcoming loss of usability of Emacs source files and Emacs. He plastered this dramatic title because he really does not like any Unicode. So he wants to push his opinion. This article began it. This article began the whole flame war. Thousands, over 1,000 messages on it. So this is 2015, 2015 June. Yeah. So that's the whole issue. And Stallman's message, you can see Stallman at the end says this. Okay, the guy who made the change is Paul Eggert. Paul Eggert. I don't know him, but I did my research when I was writing this. He turns out he's also a very old programmer. He is the author of Yak, the Yak parser, I think, the Unix Yak parser generator. So he made a change, and Adam McKenzie, turned it down. Richard Stallman, this message. There's a message from Richard Stallman that I don't know if I included here, but anyway, if you are interested, go read this article. No, I don't think it has anything to do with compiling Emacs. Basically, these people, their reason, they just don't like Unicode in source code. Because, for example, Alan's complaint is that, then you cannot type it. Because, many of these people's opinions are just wrong. Because today you can actually see tons of places that has Unicode ASCII characters in programming source code, including I'll name a few. Okay, in JavaScript, many big libraries project does that. In Golang, does that. Okay, Golang source code, you can see. I'm not sure about source code, but in Golang, for okay, at least in Golang documentation, in Golang official documentation, in scheme Lisp documentation. Actually, I can say, in lots of these languages, source code, in major projects, not just like tiny project, but major projects of these languages, you will see Unicode, non-ASCII characters. Okay, that's it for today. So you have 10 seconds to give me your last thoughts, your parting words for today. I was watching Game of Thrones, and they behead people. They behead people. So, but when they do, they ask, "What's your final word?" You have to ask them that. Uh, yeah, yeah, that's Richard Stallman. I think that's what Richard Stallman says. Good evening. So, good. Have a good evening. See you guys.